Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cast, coming at you on Wednesday, the 8th of May. We're having a little slight delay in recording the podcast this week. Usually we record on Tuesdays. This week we are recording on Wednesdays, but we're still out here doing our best to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence. And slight programming note for all the generous folks supporting us directly through Patreon and with a paid Substack subscription. Tomorrow we will be recording our subscriber podcast, and we will dive deeper into a Wellington Phoenix versus Melbourne Victory A-League Finals preview. So we'll get lots of tactics, lots of Phoenix nuance in our subscriber podcast tomorrow, as well as touching on a few broader ideas about Aotearoa sport, and such as you might have seen some headlines about rugby union players having issues playing league, whether it's the players in the Black Ferns switch into league, or first 15 kids not being allowed to play for the Warriors junior teams. So we'll dive into that tomorrow as well, because it's already happening to a large extent. So pretty much every Warriors junior played first 15. Pretty much every Kiwi NRL junior played first 15. And there's Black Fern Sevens who are already playing NRLW. There are Black Fern Sevens who are playing Sevens and NRLW. There are players who have already moved from the Black Ferns to the NRLW without the Warriors in the NRLW. So what I'm suggesting here is the Rugby League takeover is already happening. But you're just starting to see these ideas, these storylines start to filter out into the Aotearoa media. So we'll be diving into some of those topics and any other bits and pieces that arise in the next 24 hours for our subscriber podcast. You can access that subscriber podcast by supporting us through Patreon, patreon.com/elnichecache, E-L Nichecache. Or if you are signed up for our Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com, then you can upgrade to a paid Substack subscription and access the subscriber podcast through Substack. What we're doing at the moment as well is, if you are a member of the Patreon whānau, the morning after the Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack, we just copy it into Patreon. So if you're a member of the Patreon whānau, you just get everything right there in Patreon. Don't need to sign up to anywhere else. But if you don't want to use Patreon, it's all good. You can sign up to our free newsletter full of Aotearoa sporting information via Substack. And there is an option to upgrade to a paid Substack subscription as well. And if you just want to big us up, just a one-off big up, you can hit us up on Buy Me a Coffee as well. Or just check in with all things Niche Cache, the niche-cache.com. And if you're watching this, you probably know we're across the interwebs. So however you want it, we're out here doing our best. We do have a little bit of Blackcaps, a little bit of NBL, a little bit of Wellington Phoenix, a little bit of flying Kiwis, lots of Kiwi footballers doing great things around the world. And of course, the losing Warriors. Shout out to them. Can't really, I don't know, we'll just save that for the back end of the podcast, because it's, let's just say it's far less fun to watch than it was last season. But before we get into any Aotearoa sporting matters, let's get a bit of mindfulness. What do you got, Chief?
I have got a quote from the great, the legendary, the iconic jazz saxophone player. I believe he's still alive, but he doesn't play saxophone anymore because he's like in his 90s. Sonny Rollins, who once said, and this obviously here he is talking about like jazz improvisation on stage and concerts and whatnot, or perhaps in the studio, but it feels extremely applicable to basically whatever area you want to apply this to, when he says you cannot think and play at the same time.
Bit of flow state.
Yeah, bit of flow state. That's a lovely modern way that we've come to describe the same idea, I think, where it's like, if you're thinking, you're not acting. because you're thinking about acting, like you're one step removed from the process itself. And if you're acting, you're not thinking because you're in that state. You can't do both at the same time.
I've come to view those activities as a form of meditation. I think a lot of people, like when they,
Yep.
when they listen to our podcast and they hear a bit of mindfulness and they hear a bit of meditation talk, they think, oh, I got to sit cross-legged for half an hour. And how are you supposed to do that? To be honest, I don't do that. There's a bunch of ways you can meditate, and one of them is just getting into a bit of flow state, like just do an activity where you're aware of your thoughts, but then the next level, heading into a flow state, is there are no thoughts. You're just doing it. You're just out here doing it. So shout out to that guy,
Sonny Rollins. Shout out to
Sonny
Sonny Rollins.
Rollins.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I think there's like there's the definitive form of meditation where you just sit there and try to not think about stuff, but there's also just a million other ways of, like, if you're doing something creative, you'll find yourself in that place. You go for a run or something like this, or just lose yourself somehow, some way. Listening to music, for example, is another way of achieving this. Like anything that you can just latch your focus on that's single-minded and without distraction is meditative.
For damn show. Many of the topics we're discussing today, they were explored in our Monday newsletter. So if you're signed up to the newsletter, you get all this stuff sent straight to you, some Aotearoa sporting thoughts on a Monday evening. And I did drop a Blackcaps T20 World Cup first 11 that I'm curious about. I'm curious to get your thoughts on. So here we go. Fenelon, Rachin Ravindra, Kane Williamson, Daryl Mitchell, Glenn Phillips, Mark Chapman, Michael Bracewell, Mitchell Santner, Ish Sodhi, Tim Southey, Trent Bolt. And in that team, I'm going to say Fenelon, you can be the wicketkeeper. And then we've got Devon Conway, Jimmy Neesham, Lockie Ferguson, and Matt Henry in the squad, who will probably play a game. Like, you're not going to roll out your first 11 for each one of these games, especially playing some of the up-and-coming cricketing nations. So obviously, I like the Allen Ravindra combo up top. I think that is a extremely entertaining, exciting, invigorating opening partnership. Left-hand, right-hand combination, lots of strokes, 360, attacking oomph. But Devon Conway's probably got the most wicket-keeping mana in the squad. So I can see how Conway might open the batting there. Jimmy Neesham and Lockie Ferguson, I think, will play a fair amount of cricket in this World Cup. Obviously, they can both come in at the expense of a spinner, maybe. So you might not have Bracewell, Santner, and Sodhi. I think Matt Henry is he's kind of number 15 in the squad depth chart. But that's all right, because he's a reliable cricketer. What do you reckon about that first 11 for the T20 World Cup coming up in a few weeks, months? I don't know when, but it's coming up.
About a month, I think it is, something like that. I think definitely Henry is going to be a predominant backup. I think that's sort of the hierarchy of that team makes that clear enough. I suspect Jimmy Neesham also will be, so I agree on that count. And I think with Neesham, it's like it's kind of Neesham or Bracewell, because they both sort of do the same thing. You can obviously find ways to get them both in, but I don't think you're necessarily going to do that unless you wanted to drop Mark Chapman. I don't think that's necessarily in the plans either, considering Chapman just has a better batting record over the last 2 years than other dudes. In which case, I think you just lean with Bracewell because he's the spinner, and we're expecting sort of spinny conditions. I think there's 2 points of contention's not the word, but there's two sort of interesting aspects of year 11, which is obviously the Devon Conway being on the bench instead, with Rachin Ravindra playing instead. We talk, I can't remember if it was the subscriber pod last week, I think it was, so some people might not have heard this, but we did talk through that idea. And I quite like that. I'm definitely not opposed to that idea. Rachin Ravindra, the big game player, loves the tournament. And Devon Conway, it is an elephant in the room that he's kind of fallen out of form over the last at least 12 months in all three international formats. And yeah, over the course of a tournament, everyone's going to get games. That's fine. But that's going to be a very interesting aspect of the squad because I think there's great evidence on both counts to whether you go Conway or Ravindra. And I don't really know that you can fit either of them into the squad anywhere else at the moment. Like, you're not dropping Kane Williamson, you're not dropping Glenn Phillips. Don't think you're going to drop Daryl Mitchell. And beyond that, you're getting into like players who can bowl a little bit. Well, Mark Chapman, I suppose, but that's also, those 6-7 roles also a kind of a specific closing role too. Like, you want a lot of power in those roles. I don't necessarily know that Ravindra has played there a little bit in T20 internationals. Conway hasn't. He's always been a top order dude. Like, I don't really see them playing in that role. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. Like, are they brave enough to drop a senior player? But at the same time, there's a lot of evidence to why you want to pick Rachin Ravindra as well. So there's kind of like a movable object, unstoppable force situation going there, and that'll tell us some interesting things about their approach as to which way they go. I can see a way in which, especially because if you've got Bracewell and Phillips and potentially also Rachin Ravindra, you might not want to pick Santner and Sodhi. Like, you might be able to get enough spinovers as those other guys, in which case you chuck in Lockie Ferguson so that you've got a speedster in there as well. That might be a wicket to wicket, game to game kind of decision, though. So I don't necessarily know that affects the first 11. It's just a matter of how things are looking per day. But yeah, I think beyond that, like, Tim Southee's going to be playing. Trent Bolt's going to be playing. I know there's like question marks you can have about them in their recent form, although Southee's T20 specific form has been excellent. And Bolt is at least playing a lot of T20s in the IPL and whatnot. Like, I don't see any doubt of them being in there. Don't see any doubt of Kane Williamson being in there. I think the rest of the squad is pretty well sorted, and that's a nice place to be going into a World Cup where like 9 out of 11 players locked in, and then you got a couple little fluid ones depending on form and conditions, which I think you need that little bit of flexibility as well, particularly in T20s. So I don't know. I like the way that's shaping up. I am as confident about the Blackcaps being competitive at this T20 World Cup as I was before the squad was picked.
Beauty. I think the Blackcaps are going to find as similar conditions as there are in the world in the Caribbean compared to India, where the ODI World Cup was played, and Rachin Ravindra went crazy at the ODI World Cup. So I am quite excited to see Ravindra playing at this T20 World Cup because I think it's designed for Ravindra in my assessment. Let's touch on the NBL a bit here, where we've got Wellington Saints. They are 6-1, Auckland Tuatara 7-2. They are the best teams in the NBL. And in our newsletter yesterday, you dropped some stats for the best Kiwi ballers in the NBL. And two things stand out for me. Points per game. Tom Vodanovic first, Corey Webster second, Robert Lowe third. They all play for the Tuatara. So the Tuatara have the three leading points per game lads of the Kiwi basketballers. All of them are averaging over 21 points per game. So lots of firepower in that Auckland Tuatara outfit. Obviously, these are just the Kiwi lads. Like, a lot of the imports are leading these stat categories as well. And then there's only one bloke I'm putting the spotlight on here. It's the one and only Hiram Harris, who is second for assists of the Kiwi basketballers. He is second for rebounds per game, and he is fifth for steals per game. So Hiram Harris in the NBL this season, he's averaging roughly 2 steals per game. He's getting 12 rebounds a game, and he's getting 6.5 assists per game. Unfortunately for Hiram Harris, like, he's not top 5 for points per game of the Kiwi basketballers, but he's doing everything as Hiram Harris does, and those are the two best teams. So Wellington Saints, they got Hiram Harris doing everything, and they are 6-1. They've also got Isaiah Moreahu'u-Leafa, who has 3.5 steals per game, which is the most of the Kiwi basketballers. He's also got 4.5 assists per game, which has him fourth of the Kiwi basketballers in the NBL. So you got a lot of Hiram Harris, a lot of Leafa, and then Auckland Tuatara, they are second with that trio of excellent scorers and excellent Kiwi basketball players. Also worth highlighting that Corey Webster, he is first for assists per game of the Kiwi lads. Rob Lowe is fifth in assists. So Rob Lowe, how about this? Rob Lowe, he's third for points of the Kiwis, fifth for assists, and first for rebounds. So I don't know if you can... I think overall, Hiram Harris and Rob Lowe are on a similar level of just doing everything in the NBL. And we have, that's it for the Auckland Tuatara in those stat categories. How do you view those two little pockets there of the two best teams in the NBL so far?
Yeah, I'm tempted to chuck Corey Webster in the doing everything categories as well, but it's not really everything. It's just doing everything offensively. Defending well enough, but like he's not up there with steals and rebounds, obviously, because that's not his role on the team. But he has more 20-plus point games than any other Kiwi so far this season. And when he doesn't score 20, he's still getting at least like 15 plus, and he's chipping in with like 7, 8, 9, 10 assists. When the shot's not dropping, he's still getting other guys involved. He's like, if you're picking the best performing Kiwi players so far, I think it's Corey Webster, Rob Lowe, and Hiram Harris. But there are, it's a lot of these dudes who are relatively experienced Tall Blacks at this stage are having strong seasons. Like, they're doing the things that you expect Tall Blacks veterans to be doing, which is popping up and dominating, including Ty Webster the other day, scored 40. It's the highest scoring game for a New Zealander. In a defeat, I might say a word on that later because there's an angle on that. But just to stick to the task at hand, the Wellington Saints and the Auckland Tuatara are interesting because they are dominated in scoring by New Zealand players. Not alone. Like, I think when Wellington won on the weekend against the Jets, it was Lat Mayan scored 26 points. Ben Eyre gets a few. So like they mix it up a bit, but they've got Leafa hitting 3-pointers. They've got Toy Smith-Milner hitting 3-pointers. Taine Samuel actually popped up for them on the weekend. So he's a new addition to strengthen an already strong team. And that was without Hiram Harris, who missed that game through injury. And they still scored 107 points in a 25-point victory against the Jets. So admittedly, the Jets aren't, not having an amazing season, but still, that's a fairly comprehensive one. And the Tuatara scored 120 points against Hawke's Bay, won by 24 points, with, I think, Rob Lowe scored 31 and Vodanovic scored 31. If I check that correctly, that is true. Webster with 18 and 11 assists, 19 and 11 assists, just 19 points, 11 assists, just to prove what I was saying. Lowe also had 18 rebounds. Rob Lowe, 35 minutes, 31 points on 14 of 23 shooting, so close to 2 out of every 3 shots went in, with 18 rebounds and 5 assists. So it's a pretty emphatic stat line from him. But the interesting thing about that, those are the 2 top teams in the league right now, the Tuatara and the Saints. They've got the most wins. They have Kiwi players scoring significant amounts every single game, and just in general, they are the 2 highest scoring teams. Like, they're the best 3-point shooting teams. They shoot the most. They score the most points in general. Like, there's a pattern there. There's a pattern there of the guys who have the high scoring Tall Blacks players in their squads are also the two teams that seem to be winning the most games right now. So it's a pattern that I quite enjoy, because sometimes you do get the impressive import who comes out and scores 30 a night or something, carries teams to victory, but I don't know. There's not a legacy for that. That's a one and done kind of thing for us as fans watching that. Whereas the Kiwi players performing against those kind of guys, well, that's something we stick with for years on end, because those are careers we get to follow and support. So that's cool. I like that pattern. I like that pattern, and I have definitely noticed it as well. The two best teams are the two highest scoring teams with strong Kiwi scoring contributions each and every week, and not necessarily the same dudes as well, because it's Corey Webster one week. I mentioned Vodanovic and Lowe both scored 30 in this one. For Wellington, maybe Smith Milner scores a bunch. Maybe it's Liafa. Maybe it's Harris. They're able to switch it around from week to week.
Two more questions before you get to Ty Webster. How many of those Wellington Saints and Auckland Tuatara players are signed to the Breakers?
None.
Oh,
none of them. A few of them have been, quite a few of them have been signed for the Breakers, but right now the Breakers' only New Zealander is Sam Ordenberg, who's not playing Kiwi NBL. You might want to count Mojave King as a half New Zealander if you want. He was born here, strong Kiwi connections in his family on his mother's side, but has said all along he wants to play for Australia, so I don't know if that really counts. But if you count him as a half, well, it doesn't matter. He's not playing NBL either. So no Breakers are involved in the NBL, except Mitch McCarron. Aussie Mitch for, I think it's Hawke's Bay. He's hanging around getting some good assists. He's playing quite well.
So the two best teams have a lot of Kiwi players doing their best mahi, but none of them are signed to the Breakers. So that's good to note. Also, like you mentioned...
Actually, I should mention they do have... I think they still have McNaught, Davison, and Darling on contract as DPs, development players. So there are three Breakers development players, not up near the top of the...
yeah, I'm only talking about Wellington and Auckland.
Stats, so yeah, and none of them play for those three teams.
Yeah, like this is specifically about Wellington and Auckland, who are the best teams. They have lost a combined 3 games full of Aotearoa basketball talent, none of which is good enough to play for the Breakers. My second question, you did mention a bit of Tom Vodanovic there. So because Tom Vodanovic, Corey Webster, Rob Lowe, they all do slightly different things. Like Corey Webster, quintessential scorer, Rob Lowe, big man who does a bit of everything. And then you've got Tom Vodanovic, who's more like a beefed up wing. Like he's gonna hustle. He's quite similar to Hiram Harris, just without the playmaking, maybe. So what have you noticed about how Tom Vodanovic is getting his points and his general mahi with the Auckland Tuatara, considering that there are 2 other dominant players in that team with Corey Webster and Robert Lowe?
Yeah, if I had time, I'd look up his game log and see how that looks, because I think there is a bit of, like I said, there's a bit of like pass the baton from week to week. You don't need to be the dude scoring heaps, but whoever's got the hot hand is going to eventually, it's going to be the one to carry them that particular game. I think with Vodanovic, a lot like quite a few of these sort of fringy Tall Blacks, Aussie NBL type talents, a lot of it does depend on when the 3-point shot is going in. And with Vodanovic at this level, generally it does pretty nicely. He is, a muscular human being who's going to throw himself around. He's going to get rebounds. He's going to play hard, physical, but he's also going to get free on the edges and shoot a lot of shots. And yeah, he seems to be, I haven't got his percentages, but he seems to be hitting a fair few of those if he's, capable of scoring what did he do on the weekend? 4 of 6 from 3-point for his 31 points, 11 of 16 shooting overall. He's kind of a scorer for this team. He obviously doesn't have to be the main man rebounding or assistant or any of these kind of things. They've got other guys who do a lot of, other guys with big, well-rounded skill sets. he's kind of just got to fit in around those, and he will get shots. And he's getting shots, and he's making shots, and that's why he is. I think he was top. He was number one, wasn't he, on the Kiwi scorers so far after that 31 pointer, nudged him up ahead of the rest of the pack. He missed the start of the season, so his stats are a little bit off compared to something because he was getting married. He was also winning an NBL championship with Tasmania, so he's probably played a couple games less, but I think only a couple. I think he only missed one or two in the end, and he's obviously more than caught up since then.
T. Webster, what do you reckon?
You know what I reckon is the thing that stuck out about him scoring 40 points, and it wasn't defeat. I will say that, like they were like trying to play quick. They were trying to score quick buckets in order to hang around. It was Otago against Canterbury, so a lot of that just went to okay, let's give it to old T Web and let him do some stuff. Let him drive at the hoop. Lots of pull ups. Hidden a lot of those pull ups though. He shot extremely well. I think he shot like 16 of 20 from 2 point range in that, which was what was interesting because the only higher scoring individual game so far this season was from our mate MJ from Canterbury. Coincidentally, he scored 41 in a game. MJ, who I've worked this out now. He's James Michael Walker Jr., I think, which means his initials are JM, but he goes by MJ. He just swaps his initials around. I guess if you're a basketballer, I can see the temptation, right? But and I did see another one on the NBL's website. There was someone else who was like a KJ or something. I can't remember who it was, but someone else had the initials, and it only showed up as their initials on the just a random glitch on the NBL website. But yeah, MJ scored 41, and I think he shot like 23 point attempts in that game. Like he scored 41 just shooting three balls over and over and over. Ty Webster scored 40 shooting 5 total attempts. I think he shot 2 of 5 from deep, and he hardly got to the free throw line as well. Like he wasn't getting a lot of foul calls. He was just hitting pull-up twos and layups on the drive over and over and over again. So it's funny that the two 40-plus point games this season completely contrasting. Like one by a local, one by an import. One with a bunch of just slick 2 point action, playing off the dribble. One just shooting, full stop, just shooting over and over and over and over. 3-pointers like all day long. And those are the two top scoring games of the season, entirely contrasting.
That MJ thing would be like if my name was Steve Thompson Refe. Shout out to the referee. I think Butler is the certified referee of the NRL for all Warriors fans there. So it's Steve Thompson Refe, but I write it down as RTS.
Yeah, yeah, sort of.
Or you can go like Wilson, Bruce, Sean. And then you write it down as SBW.
SBW, yeah. I was wondering when you said Wilson, I was trying to think, are we going with Watane Zelesniak here, or were we?
It's a bit weird, like you just like, this is my name, but I'm going to write it down completely different as MJ to compare me to Michael Jordan, when you've got someone like Anthony Edwards, who everyone is saying is the second coming of Michael Jordan, and he's saying, nah, I'm not Michael Jordan. But then you got other players. I imagine that dude's from America. He's playing in New Zealand, and his name that he wants is MJ. When there's a guy who's far better compared to MJ, doesn't want to be compared to MJ. That is crazy.
That is actually funny to think about. It's like the ones who openly imitate, and then the ones who like actually just emulate, and the difference between those. Yeah. I mean, you hear of people who go by their middle name instead of their first name, but I don't know that I've ever heard of anyone swapping their initials around before. But, fair play. He did score 41 points in the New Zealand NBL. So, he's a gun.
Kinda. Random question that will test your top of the dome abilities here. Who's your favorite up-and-comer Kiwi baller? Like your favorite youngster in the NBL this season?
Well, a lot of my focus has been on scoring, so I think I still have the 20-point game things up here. I do. Um, let's go with Campbell Scott from Manawatu because I think he's got a 30-point game, and he had a, I think he, in fact, I think he scored 30 on the weekend. He has, yeah. Oh, I don't think I've updated it. No, it was Liam Judd scored 30 on the weekend, I think, against Wellington. But Campbell Scott is 19, 20-ish. I mean, there's a lot of dudes I could mention who don't get big like sort of stat lines. They're a season or two away from doing that because they're youngsters. But yeah, that's why my favorite is the one I get to watch actually put highlights together because they're a couple years maybe removed from high school. They're not just prospects. They're actually like beginning to break into rotations. And Campbell Scott's having a nice little season for a semi-struggling Jets team. Like they're not great, and that sort of helps a little bit if you in order to get a few more minutes. But he's had a couple of 20+ games. I think he had a 28-point game was the top one, and he's also had like a 2-point game in there. So there's a big fluctuation between the best, but that's just standard young player stuff, isn't it? Like consistency from week to week isn't great, but I don't know if you see a dude who you're not as familiar with come into a season being able to put up 20 plus in an NBL game against like tall black talent plus import talent across the board. That's a bit of an awakening, and I liked what he's like what he's capable of doing. He seems like a nice sort of, I don't know, a certified scorer when things are like not yet on that week to week consistency, but he's shown the capabilities, which is the first step. I like that. I think he's from the Manawatu region. I think he spent a year with like Southland or something last year, and he's come back home. I think is what the story was, but yeah, I can't remember.
Let's swing into some flying Kiwis football and busy weekend of Kiwi football action around the world. First question though, who is Owen Parker Price? I haven't heard or seen his name in the Flying Kiwis discussion before. Who is he? Who does he play for?
Yeah, that's a great question because even people who have heard his name and recognize that might be thinking like, oh yeah, what's that dude been up to? He was with he was one of the dudes who came up with the Ole Academy when Declan Edge was there. So at the time of like Callum McCoward, Elijah Just, some of those, those kind of guys, Dalton Wilkins, and he he was with them as a pretty solid, impressive midfielder when and at the same age as those guys as well. So like 18, 19, 20, around when Eastern Suburbs won the National League that year. Which is an Eastern Suburbs team that also had Tim Payne in it and also had Andre De Jong in it, who weren't from Ole Academy but just were with Eastern Suburbs at the time before the Ole guys linked up. Coached by Danny Hay as well, like just a fascinating team to look back on. Um, they, yeah, those guys have all gone on like different tangents and different paths in their careers, but a bunch of them went with Declan Edge to Sweden, where they set up this link with like a lower grade Swedish club called Torslanda. And a few other, like Nando Pleineke was part of that crew as well. He spent a little bit of time with Torslanda. Sort of the better ones, Macau just Pleineke himself after that initial little stint went to bigger clubs because Torslanda were like third tier Sweden, and then they also got relegated very soon after this. So there was like this Ole Academy link with the Swedish team, which at first they were talking about like this is going to be a pathway to Kiwi players over, and a few of them did. Like a few other guys went along. Sean Bright is of a younger vintage that's linked up and stayed there. A couple others passed through. I think Ryan Foyts might have been there for a little bit. Um, Josh Rogerson, I think, might have even had a stint. I can't remember. But then they kind of stopped bringing over new guys and just got a bit more grounded in like we're a Swedish community club that just happens to have a couple of New Zealanders and coached by New Zealand Dan Keat as well as the director of football. Um, And so I think they kind of got away from that. And Ole Academy's changed a lot since then. They got a new head in there, and that seems to just, there's no longer a link there. It's just, they're not Ole Academy anymore. But so it's a weird little thing, but just a strange situation and a confusing story because we don't entirely know all the details of that. But suffice it to say, Torslanda did get promoted back up to the Swedish third tier last year. So they're back in the Swedish third tier, and they still have 4 New Zealanders who are hanging about there. 3 of them have been there pretty much since day one. So you got Harry Edge, who's Declan's son. You've got Owen Parker-Price. You've also got Dominic Woolridge, plus Sean Bright, who I mentioned is a couple years younger than those guys. He's gone over there now. So it's a strange one because like Owen Parker-Price in particular, I thought was an excellent prospect, and he's now like 25 years old and hasn't played higher than the Swedish third tier. So whereas some of his mates have gone on and bouncing around to some pretty significant clubs in Europe. So it sort of feels like I don't want to say wasted potential, but it sort of feels like a player who never quite explored those possibilities, but then also scored a banger of a goal for Torslanda on the weekend. Scored a ripping goal outside the box, whacked it top corner. First win of the season for them. I think they lost their first 3 games 1-0. So all 1-0 defeats. So there's some fine margins going on there. Then they drew a couple. Then they won 1-0. So they're steadily improving to start their time in the Swedish third tier. And Owen Parker-Price did score a really nice goal. So that's cool. If you're wondering what happened to that dude, if you saw him 5-6 years ago for the Eastern Suburbs when they won the National League, and you're wondering exactly where he's got up to, well, he's the same place. Like he's been the same place the whole time, helping out with the Torslanda project. And yeah, good check that we did retweet that goal, and it is in Flying Kiwis this week. So check out the goal if you haven't seen it. It's a banger.
Can I test my football lingo and say that it was a top bin? He put it in the top bin.
Yeah, top bins.
So he put it in the top bin, but we also had Jana Radosavljevic. She also went top in. So Parker-Price went top in on the right. Jana went top in on the left for her team Duisburg. And we also had goals from Elliot Collier, Moses Dyer. Ollie White had a little back heel flick for an assist. Flying Kiwis are doing some fantastic things around the world. Gabby Rennie, she's
goal and an assist.
Yeah, she's offering some attacking funk. And you were curious about Gabby Rennie a few weeks ago, her status. Something I remember us talking about Gabby Rennie at some point recently.
Yeah, she pops up a bit because she's one of those football ferns players who's played a lot of games without really contributing to them getting better at scoring goals, and partly just that's a matter of timing. Like she's just been around at a time when there hasn't been a great amount of depth, which they're working out of that now, and she's steadily improving now that she's started. She's jumped. That's the other reason maybe why we might have talked to her as well, is because she did go through the USA college system, and so is like quite a good example of someone who's a good prospect who maybe didn't develop anywhere near as much as we would have liked over 4 years of college. But is now a professional. Like I think a lot of her development probably came with the football ferns, which is not really the job of the football ferns. You just pick the best players. You're not meant to coach and develop the best prospects. That's not how a national team should work. But it's just been a needs must kind of era. But that's the thing. Like Jackie Hand is scoring goals at club level and for country. Indy Riley is scoring for club and for country. Hannah Wilkinson's not her best A-League season, but a pretty good one. As a beaten finalist, scored 10, 11 goals or something like that this season. There's attack and talent that's coming through like we haven't had for probably ever in terms of like the scale and the depth of it, but also in terms of just having a first 11 where you can pick players who are in good form for their clubs because they are playing for good clubs and scoring goals, and building that out. Part of that as well is having players challenging those players. Like you don't just get in there and stay in there because you're the only option. And Gabby Rennie is someone who maybe been picked quite a lot at a time when at a time when the depth wasn't quite there. But then now that the depth is getting there, you can see the ways in which she's stepping up for Ireland United, the same club that Jackie Han got her professional start with as well. And she's just there was one game where I think they lost, and while the scores were still tied, she missed a great chance to score a header, so like she could have scored a big goal there. And I'm thinking like, well, that's kind of it, isn't it? Like that's what we're talking about, is player gets in a good position but can't finish. That's a pretty football fernsy kind of thing to do. But then, when she's actually been playing in what I think is her best position out on the right wing, she's been whipping in some stunning crosses, and she had a couple of them on the weekend. One of them floated perfectly onto the head of a striker to head in for their first goal. The other one, she kind of sliced, but it flew into the I won't say top bins because I think it went more middle of the goal because of the angle swerving back in. But she scored it from almost on the sideline. It was a bit of a fluke, and it was a bit of a fluke because Gabby Rennie is one of the best hype people you can have on a football team. She's always excited, celebrating with her teammates. Didn't celebrate when she actually scored one of her own, so that's maybe a little bit of a tip off. But to see her, because she got an assist last week as well, she could have had more goals and assists. She's been pretty good. So I'm super impressed how quickly she's just adapted to that team in the same way that Jackie Han did. And look where Jackie Han has been able to take her career since then, at the exact right time when she needed to be doing this as well. It's good and promising. And then I think that you can also tie that pretty much into the Jana Radosavljevic thing as well, where here's a fringe football fern player who didn't and hasn't been getting picked a lot in recent times. I think she has 3 caps. She's been in a few squads. I think the last time she got called up was when they played America here, where they were missing a lot of players. So they called up a few sort of fringe ones. She was just getting into the football ferns when she had I think she had 2 relatively serious knee injuries. I think she did an ACL, and then she came back a couple of years later, did a meniscus when she was playing for Werder Bremen, which was in the German top flight. Radosavljevic is born in Serbia, largely raised in Serbia, but lived in Wellington for a good stint of her childhood, and so was eligible for the football ferns. I think she played Serbia under 19s, but New Zealand internationally. So maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect going on there in terms of why she hasn't been picked more often. I don't know, but she's had a fairly steady career. Apart from those little injury stints where she's had a year having to recover herself after that, she's had a pretty strong career. She's had 2 different stints in the German top flight, most of it in the sort of German second tier, I think. But she was with Werder Bremen for a season, and now she's spent half a season with MSV Duisburg, who have already been relegated, so they're going down. She joined a team that was heading for relegation, and they've continued to head for relegation. But she scored a beautiful free kick on the weekend against Werder Bremen, so against her old club. It was a nice little sentimental moment. She's mostly only playing off the bench, so maybe relegation will help. Lose a couple of players and then she becomes a starter instead. It worked for Maya Hahn, for example, and as her team looks likely to be the ones to replace Duisburg and get promoted. So there's I don't know if there's been a point of history where we could talk about fringe football ferns players who are on the edge of being selected versus actually hardly ever get selected, also still scoring goals professionally. I think that is as good of an indication of the changing times as we've had. You're getting players who are scoring goals at decent levels who maybe that doesn't even push them up the pecking order because other players are doing the same thing as well, other more established players. So I'm enjoying this different picture that we're getting from football ferns players at club level. And it's not necessarily going to translate straight into the national team because that is a step up. That is a difficult thing to do, but it's a lot better of a foundation than we had before. I'll say that much.
And obviously, Aotearoa loves a goalkeeper. So we got Vickers and we got Annalise doing great things as well. But I think at the top of the Tahutakawa tree, perched on a branch like a tui, is the also Marko Stamenic. What's the latest with the high performing Marko Stamenic?
Well, the thing about Marko Stamenic is he just wins stuff. Like wherever he goes, he just wins stuff. And he won some more stuff this week. His team had a Crvena Zvezda, aka Red Star Belgrade, if you're an Anglophile. He it's, there's a couple angles on this because there is the personal angle and there's the team angle. The team angle is that Red Star Belgrade have won the Serbian League for the seventh year in a row, for the 35th time in their history. They are also into the cup final, so they're looking to make it, I think it would be 4 consecutive league and cup doubles. So they are very much the best team in Serbia. But Marko Stamenic last year was playing in Denmark with FC Copenhagen. A little bit in and out there. Didn't like certainly wasn't a first 11 player. He was a young player trying to break into the team. So he had a couple of stints where he got a good run of games when there were injuries elsewhere and times where he didn't. But he played Champions League for them. He won the league. He won the cup. This year, he's played Champions League for Red Star Belgrade. He's won the league. They're into the cup final, big favorites to win the cup. And as they're clinching the league title, he's having his best run of starts since the very beginning of the season. The very beginning of the season, I think he played about 10 or 11 games in a row before the first time he played off the bench. Been sort of in or out for the middle stages, but he's had I think 7 consecutive starts across all competitions as we speak right now, and looking to close that out. There's a good chance he'll be starting in the cup final if that's the case. Like he's come back around with some pretty resurgent form at the time where they're clinching the title, which was a little bit of doubt at the mid-year. They changed their manager and they just lost to Partizan. It wasn't looking great, and then they just go on, like the change of manager does the trick. Initially, that came with Stamenic playing less, but he'd also been playing a little bit less towards the end of the previous manager. But clearly that hasn't lasted because he's now made 7 starts in a row and is on course to potentially and probably, to be honest, probably win League and Cup double in Denmark, followed by a League and Cup double in Serbia, and even just forget the Cups. I was trying to work this out in the newsletter on Monday. How many New Zealand footballers, excluding New Zealand National League, excluding Australian A-League and whatever, like take away the Australasia stuff, how many Kiwi footballers have won league titles in the top division of multiple countries? And the best I could come up with, and I'm sure there might be more like that. I didn't spend all day on it. I researched it for as much as I looked at all the current players and trying to think back and sort of the stuff I've specifically covered. The best I could find were 2. I had Ali Riley, who won he won several titles. I think 3 of them when she was in Sweden. Didn't win the league in the year she was with Chelsea. Didn't win the league in the year she was with Bayern Munich, even though those clubs usually win the league all the time. But did win 2 championships in America, not in the NWSL, but in the WPS, which stood for Women's Professional Soccer, which, if that name sounds kind of redundant to you, well, that's because the whole league was quite redundant. And after she won the championship with one team as a rookie, got nominated for Rookie of the Year, I think, or one Rookie Defender of the Year, or something like that. I can't remember what I wrote in the newsletter. With one team, then that team, despite being champions, folded financially. So she moved to a different team, won the title with them, and then the entire league folded and hasn't existed again since. It got replaced by the NWSL, which thankfully is a lot more stable, and she's back there now. But she did win a couple titles there. She did win a couple titles in Sweden, so she's done it. Erin Naylor's done it as well, because Bayern Munich just clinched the Bundesliga this year. Ali Riley didn't win with Bayern Munich, but Erin Naylor has won with Bayern Munich. Erin Naylor also won the French league the year she was with Olympique Lyon. Massive asterisk on that. She didn't play a single game in either of those 2 seasons. So she was a backup goalkeeper, like third, maybe even 4th choice goalkeeper for both of those teams. Made the bench a couple times, never got on the pitch. So I think if you're a backup goalkeeper, that's still quite an important role. Like I'll still count that. I'll give her that. I'm sure she got medals for both of those 2. but she didn't actually play in either of them, so she didn't actually contribute on the pitch to either of those titles. So there's like I say, there's a large asterisk on that one. But those are the only two other examples I could find. Like you think of players like Winton Rufer, it's like, well, he won in Germany, but he didn't win in Switzerland. He didn't win in Japan. He didn't, well, wasn't counting the A League anyway. If you do count the A League, then you can bring in a few more because, like Marco Rojas, for example, won in Chile and has won a couple of A Leagues. So, like, if you do that, you can spread it out a little bit more. But what Marko Stamenic has done with like winning league titles at two, not just two random countries either, like two top 20 UEFA ranked leagues is unprecedented for a Kiwi footballer. And he's done it in consecutive seasons by the age of 22. So good luck to him. I don't know how he tops this.
And as a central midfielder.
Yeah, which is quite an important role, you know. Playing minutes too. He was not just sitting on the bench. He's made a lot of starts, particularly in this season, but he made a few last year as well. He was playing Champions League for them, so he obviously wasn't sitting out on the fringes.
Big up Marko Stamenic. Let's dive into this Wellington Phoenix finals game. Now, these are two-leggers. So they are in Melbourne on Sunday. I don't know if these are New Zealand times or Australian times. Say 6 p.m. here on the A-League website. Is that a 8 p.m., 9 p.m. kickoff, whatever the daylight savings, what time exchange is?
No, it seems to be 6 p.m. New Zealand time.
So 6 p.m. New Zealand time, Sunday. Oh, glorious. And then I actually think the Warriors are playing Sunday as well, if my memory serves me correct. The Warriors are playing...
I think there's an overlap.
I think they're at 4 p.m. So that should be all good. A little overlap. Yeah, Warriors Roosters 4 p.m. and then you got Wellington Phoenix at 6 p.m. Not a huge fan of the two-legger. Like, just play a game of football. Best team wins. If you're not the best team and you don't win, hard luck. And obviously, whoever qualifies higher should get the home game. But whatever this is, they're trying to stretch it out as long as possible. So you get the two-legger. Wellington Phoenix in Melbourne. What are your expectations? Like, are you thinking this week that the Wellington Phoenix can go to Melbourne and get a win?
I think they can. I think based on what we've seen from them in a lot of away games, the first and foremost target will be to try and keep a clean sheet and try and at least not lose, because they will back themselves to be able to win at home, certainly. And
that's not baseball,
if that's
though.
the case,
try not to lose isn't baseball.
That is not. I thought you said baseball at first. Like this, yeah,
sorry,
it's not baseball. So you're right, but also it's also not baseball. You're right. You're right on both counts. The imaginary one and the real one. Yeah. Well, it might be chief ball though, because we have seen that from a lot of them. Like they're more likely. I think. I never took note of when they played back fives versus when they played back fours, and in my notes I haven't got that written down, but. Generally speaking, when they picked a five, it's because they added Isaac Hughes into the back line, and I think 3 of his 5 starts have been in away games. So that tells you like that's more of a strategy when they are on the road. And I think in a finals game, that will be certainly like they will have absolute confidence that if the tie is level after the first leg, they will be able to progress. Like they'll be able to beat Melbourne Victory at home by whatever means necessary. If they do win away, they're massive favourites. They lose, that's tricky because this isn't necessarily a team that scores a lot of goals. So the defense does have to be the foundation. And yeah, we'll see. I expect to see a much more cagey first leg than second leg because I think the Knicks will open it up a lot more in the second leg. So what I'll say to answer the question, I will say, yeah, they can win, but I think they will be happy enough as long as they don't lose.
how do they not lose? Like, what are some details that you've seen between the Phoenix and the Victory this season that will help them not lose? Because I do feel like, obviously this isn't backed up with any concrete evidence, but I do feel like the Wellington Phoenix have played pretty well against the Victory this season. Like, they've been able to. I think there was that one game where they didn't score any goals and they didn't have any shots or box entries or something like that earlier in the season.
They didn't have any shots, but they did score a goal. That's what happened.
Yeah, righto. Go figure. So I do feel like the Wellington Phoenix can, like, all the weird visions I'm having of the Wellington Phoenix scoring goals against the Victory. I don't know as much off the top of my head about how the Wellington Phoenix can stop the Victory, and I think defense, as you alluded to before, is going to be the key factor for the Wellington Phoenix in this game over in Melbourne. So maybe we just focus on the defense here. We will expand this discussion for our subscriber podcast tomorrow. But what are some details you're looking at and thinking about? You will be writing about this over the next 24 hours, so stay tuned for that as well. But what are some details defensively that you are thinking about heading into this game in Melbourne?
Yeah, so we're a little bit lucky in this matchup in that they've actually played three times this season. These teams, like, you don't play everyone three times. I think you play everyone at least twice, but a few teams you get to play three. It's sort of like the NRL where you play everyone at least once, but some teams you only play once, other teams you play twice. The Phoenix have played the Victory three times and they haven't lost any of them. So that's a good start. Like, that's a good way to start. Two of those have been draws. The first time they played was that game away in Melbourne, the only one that they've played in Melbourne where they don't have a good record, just in the city of Melbourne in particular. It feels like they've had some bad beasts there over the years and struggled to get victories in general. But of course, this is a different Phoenix team, so I don't know how much that applies. But they did go over to Melbourne earlier on the season. They didn't have a single shot, 0 shots, but they drew 1-1 because they got an own goal off of a cross. So that was enough. Couldn't hold on for the. In fact, I think that might have been an equalizer. I can't remember. When I get around to writing about that, I'll get those specifics. I've looked through this before. But Victory had a lot more shots. Obviously, they had a lot more shots if you have 0, but they had quite a few shots in that game. We're only able to score 1. Second time they played is a little bit skewed because this was in Wellington. Was it in Wellington? It was definitely a home game. I'm trying to remember which was the game they played in Auckland, but there's 2 in Auckland. They were at home against Victory and Tim Payne got sent off, like, right at the end of the first half. And they were therefore obviously 10 men under a lot of pressure through the second half, conceded eventually, having stuck in pretty solid defensively for the most part, then conceded. But then Oscar Van Hattem, I think it was, won a penalty in stoppage time, and Alex Rufer converted it 95th minute equalizer. So they got a 1-1 draw out of that game. Third time they played them, also at home, also had an instance, like a game where they were probably on the back foot for a lot of it, but just, this is, I think, the one, because it's most recent, the one that gives us the best indication of how they'll approach this one defensively, but just held on. And then right at the end, Oscar Van Hattem, again, coincidentally, wins a free kick, whips in the cross himself. Finn Sermon sticks his head on it, goes in off a defender and is given as an own goal. A little bit harsh against Sermon. 95th minute winner. So in 3 games against the Victory, they've scored in all 3 of those games. They've only conceded 2 across those 3 games. One of the goals they scored, though, was an own goal, and the other 2 came in the 95th minute from set pieces. Yeah. So there's a pretty clear chain there of these being low-scoring affairs between these 2 teams. The Phoenix don't create a lot of chances. Victory seemed to create quite a few, specifically against the Phoenix. But the thing that stood out in that most recent one, where they did keep a clean sheet, was that I think the Victory had like 25 shots or something like that, 15 block shots. So this was like Finn Sermon, Scott Wooden doing the most Finn Sermon, Scott Wooden-y stuff of just chucking their bodies in front of absolutely everything. I think that's how the Phoenix approach this. And I think that's something where we're seeing in common across all of them is that they are not afraid to sit deep and they will crowd out the penalty area. It's sort of, this is like tendencies that they have in general, but I think they're amplified in this particular matchup. And I suspect we see a lot of that again. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. It feels like a bad thing in a playoff game when the other team has got the ball around the penalty area. But if they're not actually creating shots, if you're blocking everything and you're a good counter-attacking team, that's not the worst thing to suck them forward and then hit them on the break. So they didn't get a lot of counter-attack and joy against them in those other games, but that's absolutely going to be part of the plan. So yeah, the defensive side is to stack things, but the defense leads quite specifically, quite literally into attack if that plan works.
But are we thinking predominantly back five? Like, we're not going to see, I think we've seen it a few times, back three with the wing backs. Obviously, they can do the back four, but are we going to see the back five and just hold that line steady and then counter attack with some of the speed and skill moving forward? Because I do also feel like you can have your back four, but then play your roofers and the other young Delph maybe in the middle a bit deeper. Because I think that helps you. Let me just explore this idea. If you got a back five, you've got five dudes in your defensive line, but you're not necessarily cluttering the area outside the box to get the intercepts, to get the block shots and stop those attacking movements, because you got five bodies in a straight line, so that leaves a bit of space in front of the defensive line. But if you go back four and then you got Roofer and some of those workers in the middle, that kind of seems like that might be more conducive to stopping the goal scoring opportunities, especially because the block shots has been a key factor throughout the season. And I believe those block shots they stem from just having bodies cutting down the angles. And in rugby league, we always talk about, does your defensive line move in unison? Are they connected by a rope where you've got dudes covering the inside shoulders and you've got your center and your winger moving together? In football, I think the shutting down of the angles around outside the box, let's just say, because sitting deep is all good when you're heading to Melbourne and you're a good defensive team as the Wellington Phoenix are. Like, there's no shame in that. Like, the baseball thing was just a joke. We're not out here trying to play baseball because we want to win. And I don't know if the England Test team win a whole lot.
Well, baseball also is play your best game, like put players in their best positions to succeed, which for the Phoenix, their best stuff is defensive. Like, it doesn't have to be trying to score at 8 runs per over. You know, you can, if your best stuff is we can take enough wickets. And I'm struggling to turn this into a cricket versus football metaphor, but
baseball is we play this way and you need to play this way. That's baseball. But we're not here to define baseball because it's done. But I think the Wellington Phoenix are good enough defensively to go to Melbourne with a defensive game plan, and they have options in that backline. Like, this is the interesting thing, and I think it's a similar thing with the Warriors that I might talk about in a jiffy, but they have options with how they can defend in this game. So we've kind of set up defense as a crucial element of this game because it's away, because it's in Melbourne, because Wellington Phoenix are pretty good defensively. But even within that 90-minute game, which will probably end up being 97 minutes, the Wellington Phoenix can have different defensive looks because they've shown different defensive looks all season, and I don't know if the Melbourne Victory are going to be able to prepare for how the Wellington Phoenix are going to defend, because they might have seen the back four in most of their games. They might have seen the back five. They might have seen the back three with Sam Sutton bursting up the left flank, T-Pain bursting up the right flank. So I feel like there's a bunch of ways the Wellington Phoenix can set up their defense prior to the game, but also during the game. Like they can switch up their defensive scheme mid-game because of their personnel, because of their coaching staff, and because of how they operate.
Not only can they, but I think they will. And the the major reason for that is because with everyone fit at the moment, which more or less is touch and go on one or two players, but they have a bench that can impact a game. And that bench might, well, that bench will include Oscar Van Hatten, who has, as we've mentioned, like twice made very significant stoppage time contributions as a substitute in games against Melbourne Victory. It's also likely to include Oscar Zavada, the other Oscar, who has had an extra week to recover, like week off. Thing. He played about 10 minutes in the first two games that he came back, each of the first two games that he came back from injury, and now he's had a fortnight to recover effectively by the time from one game to the next. I don't know that you'll see him play a massive role in this first game. I think that's part of also the part of the sort of like set up the first leg and then go hard in the second leg. I think maybe the biggest difference we'll see between those would be Oscar Zavada going from playing, let's say, maybe 30 minutes off the bench in this game to 70 minutes as a starter in the next one or something like that. I mean, you can risk it depending on what the situation is as well, because if your season's over, you've got plenty of time to recover from injury after that. So I think that how they use Zavada will be quite telling. But if you're playing counter-attacking, I mean, he's more mobile than you think, but I also don't know if that's how you want to play when he's coming back from like recurring muscle injuries. But he is a very strong hold-up player, so you can get a striker like that, whip him the ball with the clearance, he holds it up, he slips it in behind Ben Old, Costa Barbarouses making runs off of him kind of thing. Like you can play that way. But you also don't need to. You can't just go direct to Old or Barbarouses running over the top. So I wonder, I think this stuff definitely, this attacking game plan will be built into how they defend. I think that's where it begins from. But yeah, they have different looks. Do you even do something weird and put Ben Old at wing back? He's been playing as sort of like a hybrid type wing back recently, but with a fullback. Would you maybe try him just as a specific wing back so that he can get the ball earlier, knowing he's such a good dribbler, get him the ball in his own half, but know he can beat a defender and take it into the half and then slide it through for Barbarouses or whoever, and then you would be able to pick maybe a David Ball starting up front with Barbarouses, or does Oscar Van Hatten get a chance maybe as a right wing back? If that's the case, you slide Tim Payne into CB just for a little bit more attack and punch, and these aren't necessarily things you do from minute one either. These might be adjustments you make when you go to the bench for the last 20 minutes. Maybe you're 1-0 down. How do we change these things? Like you say, they have options, and they've worked through a lot of these options. We've seen little looks and hints and ideas throughout the season. This is what that stuff is all for. Like, obviously, you're trying to win every game in the moment. You're trying to win that game, but also you're compiling evidence of what your team does well and how, like, what's successful against certain styles for this moment, so that when you get to these finals games, you know how to make those adjustments on the fly.
This is a bit random, but what are your what's been happening with young Delph?
I don't know. He was off the bench last week, but I think that was just a week before, whenever it was they played. I think that's just like you join a team mid-season. There's not necessarily a specific role to slot in because there's already an established team there. You just sort of play where you're asked to. He's played a little bit of right back at times. He's mostly been, well, but I mean, we've seen him play like more of the defensive midfielder, more as an attacking midfielder. He's just a little bit of a, um, he's just a little bit of a Swiss Army knife kind of player. He's like whatever the need is, here's a little fold out tool that'll sort that out.
So do you would you expect him to come off the bench and just have Rufer controlling the middle? And if Rufer's just there by himself, like who's the other worker in that midfield? Is it Pennington? Is it someone else in that midfield who is going to sit in front of the back four or just the defensive line, regardless of how many people are there?
Yeah, Rufer will do the sitting. just depends on the formation. Like if you play a back five, you might only have two midfielders. If you play a 4-3-3, you can have three, but whether that's Ben Old sliding wide or Kraev pushing forward or something, or whether you get those guys into the front three and then you've got like you'd be able to therefore pick Rufa with Pennington and maybe Houston Salas or Muhammad Altai or whoever. Kraev as well can do that role just in a same position but a different role. I don't know how that'll balance out. Last week it was Nico Pennington who kind of played as the other main midfielder, a little bit in front, but also sometimes alongside Alex Rufa. The week before that, it was Altai and Salas who did it. So again, this is one of those options. Those three players all have slightly different profiles to each other, so it's just like which one of those styles of play suits this opponent better. I think probably Pennington, just for the extra passing, will start, but I don't think he'll finish because if you got strong midfielders on the bench, you're going to use them at some point. And Delphine, not the worst bloke to chuck on into a game if you're trying to rough it up and make it a bit chaotic in the second half of a finals game.
Righty righto. Let's touch on this Warriors situation. And the situation in my mind is like two sides of a coin. One side is that the Warriors, the effort, the attitude, the grit, and maybe not the resilience that you love to bring up last season, but the attitude is there. And part of that side of the coin involves or features optimism. That they can work through the other side of the coin throughout the season. Like the NRL season's long, and I believe they can work themselves out of this hole. They are currently 14th, 3 wins, 5 losses, and a draw. Remember, after round 10 last season, they were 5-5. So they are playing this Sunday against the Roosters. If they win that game, they'll be 4-5-1, which is fairly similar to last season. So there is that, and so that combined with they try hard, right? Like that's, for a lot of Warriors folks and a lot of casual Warriors fans, that's something that maybe hasn't always been there. And at the end of the day, you just want your team to try hard and have a crack. And they're doing that. Like the attitude's there. There's some nous in their footy. They're having a dig. The other side of the coin, though, is that the attacking systems haven't really worked against the Sea Eagles, Dragons, Titans, and Knights. And this is probably the biggest issue, I believe, for the Warriors. It's their attacking system. You can, like, for all the refe stuff, the bunker, maybe there's, like, sure, they're missing tackles. Sure, they're making errors. Like, the level of footy isn't as high as we would like it to be. But the whole attacking system isn't working. And that is a major issue because personally, my excitement about watching Warriors footy last season was the attacking system. The attacking system was so energetic. Like, it filled me with energy, covering it, right? Like I was talking about the shape and the checkpoints, and you got like multiple options, and you're working teams over. You got the thread around the ruck. You got the short passing in the middle. You got the wingers scoring the tries. You got excellent shape. You've got all these attacking intricacies that helped the Warriors dismantle many opponents last season. It's not there this season. And the issue, the major issue here, is that it hasn't been present against the Dragons, Titans, Knights, and Sea Eagles. None of whom, like the Titans, were. Again, this is where we get deep into the mangroves, because the Titans were good defensively against the Warriors, but the Warriors' attack sucked. So these teams aren't noted defensive teams. Let's have a look here at the table. Titans, they're second to last. Dragons, they are 13th. Knights are 11th. The Sea Eagles are 5th, but they are the only team in the top 8 who have conceded 200 points or more. So let's check that again. Sea Eagles 200 points against the Knights. 171 points against. Dragons 234. Titans 226. So the Knights are the only kind of good defensive team there. And the Warriors haven't been able to break these teams down with their system. And when you think about the Warriors at their best under Coach Andrew Webster, the attacking system, I believe, helps out their defense. Whether it's the set-for-set grind or whether it's the manipulation of the opposition with the attack that diminishes how they attack, because they might be more tired, they've had to make more tackles, they've been having to work the ball off their own end, they've already had 12 points put on them, and now they have to come back. Like, I believe the attacking system at its best helps the Warriors defensively. So no surprises then that when that attacking system isn't working, the Warriors defense isn't as good as well. And I was thinking like how to lay this out. And the Dragons offer a good example, because the Dragons, like, they've got a variety of ways to score points, let's be honest, but also they have a main weapon, which is Zach Lomax. So what I'm kind of thinking, this isn't a perfect analogy, but it's like if the Dragons, if opposition teams are just able to shut down Zach Lomax every time. So anytime they kick to Zach Lomax, there's 3 dudes competing against Zach Lomax to snuff out his aerial threat. Whenever Zach Lomax runs the footy, there's dudes wrapping him up so he can't offload. Anytime Zach Lomax runs the footy, he is monstered because there's 3 to 4 dudes putting him to ground. You're a Dragons fan, so you understand that he's the main weapon, and if, like, I kind of think that Zach Lomax is a major factor of the Dragons attacking system. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'd argue Ben Hunt instigates most of that stuff. And so you might want, like, you could argue it's like the Hunt to Lomax connection, whether that's a cutout pass or whether that's a chip over the top or whatever. But yeah, a lot of it ends with Lomax. A lot of it does. And when the Dragons have played well this season, like for example against the Warriors, you see that pretty emphatically. When the Dragons haven't played well, like on the weekend against the Sharks, well, they're okay. They're beaten by a better team, but. Or, for example, when they got absolutely smoked by the Roosters, who the Warriors are playing next, you don't see a lot of Zach Lomax. That's not a coincidence. Whereas, like, other players who have, like, Tyrell Sloan as some X factor at fullback, but they win games where he doesn't do anything. And they lose games where he plays really well sometimes. Like, he's not necessarily a dude who influences the outcome in the way that Hunt and, yeah, definitely Lomax do.
So the difference is that Zach Lomax is one player. And what we're seeing now with the Warriors is the attacking system is being nullified. So when the teams play against the Dragons, they can nullify one player. They can limit the opportunities one player has. But we're seeing with the Warriors, against some bad teams, they are limiting the attacking impetus of the Warriors. And as I said a few weeks ago, this is most evident in how many times the Warriors shift to their edges and nothing happens. Over and over again. And that is the biggest issue. Like, they did score, I think it was Dylan Walker's try against the Knights. Tohu Harris will tip on, puts Dylan Walker in the hole. Cool. That looks like the attacking system we've come to know and love. But that was their only try. And then every other time, like, Sean's nickel clock start is amazing. I need to just, I'll have a quick a little check of his stats so far as I'm talking. Like, I think he's my favorite Warrior at this point in time. And he is awesome. But unfortunately, he's also an example of what is happening with the Warriors, because the amount of times against the Knights where Sean Krokstad got the ball on the right edge and was just tackled, that's not good, because there's no space. So this whole intricate, complex attacking system leads to no space on the edge. So what's the point? You know, like, the joy of the attacking system of the Warriors. Shout out Sean Krokstad, he's averaging 265 run meters this season, and that's his first season over 190 meters. So he's doing some good stuff at fullback. And I don't think this is at all his fault. He's just getting the footy without any overlap. So all the stuff in the middle of the field, the Wade Egan funk, the short passing of the forwards, the shape, the decoys, the options, that is designed to create space. Create space in the middle, create space 2 passes out from the ruck, and create space out on the edges. But there's no space. So what's the point? And again, this is happening against mediocre teams. And it's a pretty hefty issue, to be honest, because it's the whole system. So have teams figured out how the Warriors system? Have they sussed out what the Warriors are doing? At the moment, it looks like it, especially because, like, it's largely the same figures that are doing the playmaking. Tohu Harris, Adam Whenua-Blake, they're still in the middle. Wade Egan played 80 minutes against the Knights. He's there. Sean Johnson's there. Dylan Walker's back in the team, and he's playing big minutes. Like, these are the dudes who were the focal points of the attacking structure last year. And they're still there. And they're still having a crack. But it's not working. And at some point, it just gets a bit ridiculous when you're watching Marcelo Montoya catch the ball 10 meters off the sideline, because that's part of the shape. Is the winger and the center are 10 meters off the try line together, and the whole shape is them angling out towards the sideline, which apparently used to create space, used to generate an overlap. Now they just get tackled, and there's no overlap, and there's no space, and it's not fun to watch. And I don't know how they build on it, you know? Like, I don't know, because you can't change the whole attacking system. I don't think they can simplify it at this point. So it's a fascinating phase for the Warriors under coach Andrew Webster, because they need to figure something out to win games. And as you said, they're playing the Roosters in Sydney on Sunday. And the Roosters are much better than the Knights. They're much better than the Dragons, Titans, Sea Eagles. And they're going to be ready. And it's a pretty damn good Roosters team. Like, all their big donnies are there. So it's like, again, so against the Knights, it was pissing down with rain. Cool. That limits your attacking impetus. but we've seen it over and over again this season. We saw it round 1 against the Sharks. Clunky attack, didn't really do much. We saw it at Mount Smart against the Sea Eagles. The Warriors were off the pace, but they somehow dragged themselves back into the contest and got a draw. Like, this has been a key element of a lackluster season, and I just don't know how they fix it up or tinker with it, because part of this, as I wrote in the newsletter, is that they don't have an identity this season. They're not a great defensive team. Their attacking system isn't working. They aren't like a big bunch of mongrels like some in our team. I use that term affectionately. But they also aren't like the Bulldogs, where it's like all these back rowers and mobile forwards. Like, some teams are establishing their identity this season. We already know, like, some teams already have long established identities. The Warriors started to establish that last season. They were a real gritty defensive team, and you could count on them to break the opposition down through a complex attacking system over the course of 80 minutes. None of that's happening this season, so what's their identity? I don't know. And that is very dangerous territory if you don't have a well-established identity. And it seems a bit cliche, but it's like a real clear, precise vision of how you play your footy, how you play your sport. Wellington Phoenix, we talked about defense. Like, the Wellington Phoenix are a good defensive team. They can counterattack. Seems like the Wellington Phoenix are doing a better job of Warriors this year than the Warriors are. Because when I think about the Phoenix, they're breaking teams down. They got multiple options. It's quite a complex... It's actually the Warriors. It's a complex system with good defense. And the Warriors just aren't doing it. So not only are the Warriors struggling, and not only is their attacking system not working, but I think, bigger picture, they don't have an identity right now. They've lost their identity from last season because none of it's working. And that's dangerous, because you just... Like, the bad teams don't have an identity. The good teams do. They know what they're going to do. They do it to the best of their abilities. And it is usually pretty successful. Again, the Bulldogs have made notable improvements. They are now 8th in the top 8, and they are better than the Warriors because of their identity. This is how we're going to play our footy this season, and we're going to do it every single week. Yeah, we're going to be niggly. We're going to be pesky. We're going to be mobile and fast and aggressive. Bang. There you go. Now they're a good team. And to add to this, I actually like what is happening below the NRL team because of how many young players are playing New South Wales Cup, how many young players are playing Jersey Flegg. So I don't want to put the New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg teams in the same bucket as the Warriors NRL team, because I like what's happening. Like, there's a lot of SG ball players playing New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg. There's a fantastic development opportunity there in the Warriors, New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg teams. And both teams have had positive results over the last few weeks. They've both had a draw, a couple of wins and whatnot. But the New South Wales Cup Warriors are 7th, and the Jersey Flegg Warriors are 12th out of 14 teams. So none of these teams are among the best in those competitions. Last season, the New South Wales Cup team was consistently first, second or third across the season. So I can say, yeah, like Motu Pasikala, Sio Kelly, Kalis Fatialofa, Makaya Tafua, Jacob Auloa, like they're all stepping up to New South Wales Cup. That's exciting. You got SG Ball dudes stepping up to Jersey Flag. That's cool. But ultimately, the NRL team is 14th, the New South Wales Cup team is 7th, and the Jersey Flag team is 12th out of 14 teams. Right, that's the fact. So it's a very interesting stage. I still think there is not a reason, but there is a glimmer of hope. There's a slither of optimism here. But it's pretty iffy territory when you don't necessarily have an identity, your attacking system's not working, and you're losing to bad teams. You know, like none of these are good signs. None of these are the reasons to be optimistic. My optimism is purely based on some leftover mana from last season at this point.
But there should be a decent amount of leftover mana from last season. Like that's something where they, like you said, they had an identity there. They built into a season really nicely. They had their most successful campaign in a long time, and most of those players are still there. The coach is still there. You know, there should be not just leftover. It shouldn't have to be eating leftovers. You should be recycling. Like it should be the recipe should already be there to just continue serving up that hearty home cooked meal every season, building off of what they did last time. But yeah, I don't know. I stumbled on, you know how on the telly they do that thing where they're like coming up on the sports news after the break or whatever kind of thing. I stumbled through a room and happened to hear the bit the other day where they're like, coming up on sports news, we speak to an ex-warrior about the terrible refereeing decision against them on the weekend kind of thing. Something along those lines, which in fairness, I don't understand why that wasn't a penalty try against Dylan Watene-Zelezniak when he's tackled in the end goal, having caught the ball with only to put it down at that point. I don't understand why it wasn't given as a penalty try, but I also understand that when the focus about the Warriors goes back to being whinging about referees, like it's not like they didn't get bad decisions last year, but no one cared because they played well and they overcame them and they won anyway. Every team thinks that their team is the one that gets ripped off by referees, but actually if you watch all of them you realize just refereeing is inconsistent. It's a really hard thing to do. Probably should be a little bit better, particularly when you start bringing technology into it, but as we see in many sports, that's not actually necessarily leading to more consistent decisions. So once you start getting into that, we're whinging about stuff, and also when the news start being like, we're going to speak to an ex-player about what's going wrong with the current team, like those are as bad a signs as any when you reach those flags. But yeah, I don't know, like because it's clear to see the ways in which, I mean, yeah, like Schansnickel-Klokstad picks up the ball in a place where last year he's got a bit of room and he can create it. He's got like he's on the end of a 3v2 or something like this, and he could go himself or he could pass or whatever, or whip it out to the wingers, and they've got that overload and they can sweep around the edge and have a shot at the corner flag and trying to put that thing down. And this year it's just like those guys are getting caught up. I was just like, where has the space gone? Is it just that they've become a bit predictable trying to do the same patterns as last year and now teams have evidence of what that looks like? Or is it a simple thing of like they know so-and-so is the key player, so rush up on Sean Johnson and make him pass early, or just don't let Wade Egan do something funky? I mean, this isn't Nickel Klokstad as well. Like I've just named 3 players who can be influential in these things, so it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be a matter of just don't let Zach Lomax catch the ball and we can stop the Dragons from scoring. I've mentioned 3 Warriors players, so you can't shut them all down. You can't double up on everyone. So I don't know. We're like the best thing I can think of is that maybe they have just become a bit predictable and teams are expecting a sweep to the right and they know Johnson's going to make this pass or whatever, and maybe they're just jumping on that nice and early, and therefore that's where it goes. But I don't know. Is there something more specific, more technical like that is explaining where the space goes? Or is it just the Warriors not playing fast enough? They're not slick enough as they were. I don't know, but do you have an answer for that? Like, do you have is there something that stands out?
To, to me, it's a systematic thing because what we've talked about with the Warriors being successful is the set for set grind. Now, part of the set for set grind is not conceding penalties, not making errors, and that is the Warriors style of football under coach Andrew Webster. Keep the ball in play. Keep smashing the opposition down their end of the field. Keep turning players under to challenge the middles. Keep shifting the footy with short passing. Keep challenging defenders to make the right decision and make tackles. But if you're making errors and conceding penalties, well, the opposition gets a rest. And if if the Warriors aren't setting up their style of footy, the opposition knows, like, okay, well, I still think the shape's okay, but if you're not tired, if you haven't been working the ball off your try line the whole time, you can make better decisions. And then you can also start to dominate the tackles. So then the play the ball slows down. So then the Warriors are trying to do that shape off the back foot, which I think is probably a key detail. Like, that's how they want to attack. And it's pretty hard to attack like that off the back foot. Because it all looks honky-dory when you're playing the Rabbitohs and you're rolling downfield, you're smashing them down their end of the field, they're buggered, and then you've got some roll on and you can, like, Wade Egan gets out a dummy half because a defender's on the floor, because he's got to quick play the ball. That's what was happening against the Rabbitohs. They're buggered, they're not working hard around the ruck, so the first juncture of Warriors' attack is effective. But if you're not setting all that up and the opposition isn't fatigued and they're ready to rip in and now they are more prepared for those attacking shapes, you just get tackled out by the sideline. And it's so depressing. The thing I hate to see, and this is probably why it's so frustrating, is when the Warriors or any team rolls out their shape for the winger to be tackled by the winger one-on-one. Like, again, the whole point of your shape is to get an overlap. The whole point of your shape is to get 1 meter of space, 2 meters of space. But your shape, in this case the Warriors' shape, leads to a one-on-one situation. And it's not a one-on-one situation because you got the sideline. And the sideline is a defender. So it's like, what's the point of the whole shape, you know? Like, I don't understand. It's just so weird. But part of this, I think, especially like against the Knights, you're playing in wet conditions. It's a heavy track, like tough going. You're playing in mud. And you're not using your full bench. Like, again, these are things we've talked about all season. The attacking system has been off all season, apart from beating up the Rabbitohs. Weird bench usage has been a factor all season. Like, 2 blokes on the Warriors bench played less than 20 minutes. Tom Alley played 16, Adam Pompey didn't get on the field. We're still selecting Adam Pompey in the 17. And he doesn't play. Like, you got 17 blokes. Use them. You're playing NRL footy where everyone is ripping in. Everyone's buggered. Everyone's working hard. You need a next man up runner all the time. Because if you don't win that tackle, you don't win the next tackle. So you always need some sort of fresh vigor. But let's check in with your Dragons team this week. Again, the Dragons aren't even the best example, but you look at their bench. Whaamanu Brown adds to the team. Blake Laurie, Jack DeBellin, Ben Murdoch-Masila. That bench...
That's a good bench.
That bench and how they use that bench is better than the Warriors, just straight up and down. And it's just a weird thing with the Warriors. Like, I don't understand. And again, so this week you got Dylan Walker, Tom Alley, Jazz Tavanga, Adam Pompey. Pompey probably won't play. Tom Alley will play 10 to 15 minutes. Jazz Tavanga might play big minutes. Who knows? But you're not playing with 17 blokes. So how about this? The Warriors, in a game where you've got 17 on 17 as far as your whole squad, the Warriors are playing with 16 blokes. Now, whatever way you want to slice it, it doesn't seem like the most efficient, effective way to run a team. We're playing 16 on 17. How about that? And none of our shape's going to work. It's so strange. I don't... Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of, like, Rocco Berry's not playing his best footy. Not really excited about Marcelo Montoya. The Tamaira Martin thing, he needs to be, like, whether it's Tamaira Martin or Luke Metcalf, they're not making the Warriors better. They're looking good and bad depending on how the team is playing. And Tamaira Martin, he always looks his best when he's running the footy late in the game, and he's always running the footy late in the game, and I think that's what he does best. But whether it's him or Luke Metcalf, they're not making a difference. They're fitting into how the team is playing. Another little detail is that we've already seen a change in how the edge forwards are used. So against the Knights, Kurt Capewell went to left edge, and Jackson Ford, who has been playing left edge the whole time he's with the Warriors, he played right edge. So that's changed. So if you're changing that, that's not a good sign. Now Kurt Capewell's injured, and Mitchell Barnett plays, he was playing left edge. And again, like, Andrew Voss, his commentary is like how he wants the team to play. Like, he's never... I think Andrew Voss...
A lot of why aren't they challenging for the kick stuff still. Like,
I think Andrew Voss is up there with Scotty Stevenson in just saying blatantly wrong things with confidence. Shout out to Andrew Voss. But he also kept saying, like, him and Roach was saying Mitchell Barnett in the middle at prop. It's like, well, he's been playing on the edge for most of this game. Like, ever since Kurt Capewell got injured, he was playing left edge. And Mitchell Barnett's probably the best player right now as a prop and an edge forward. And he's named at edge forward this week. But who knows what side of the field he's going to play? Because we're already tinkering with Jackson Ford and Kurt Capewell. Is Kurt Capewell playing his best footy? No. Is Kurt Capewell healthy? No. Like, there's a lot of compounding ick that I'm starting to realize as I'm talking through this and getting more and more frustrated. So I don't know how they get out of this mess this week when they come up against the Roosters. Like, it's going to be, again, what I was explaining about the Melbourne victory stuff with the Phoenix, it felt like the points I've highlighted about the Warriors, not anymore, because all of this goes out the window when you're losing games, but feeling confident that the Warriors can score points against the Raiders, feeling confident the Warriors can score points through the middle against the Bulldogs. And up until last week, I always felt confident the Warriors could score points against the Knights. All that vanishes against the Roosters. When the Warriors play the Roosters, they usually lose. They lost last season at Mount Smart when it was pissing down with rain. So what am I like? How are the Warriors going to win this game? The Roosters are better this season. They're in Sydney. The Warriors are worse this season. None of it's angelic. It's all just a bit icky and yucky. So I don't know what will happen this weekend against the Roosters, but I think you just got to find a way to win. Any type of win is important here for the Warriors. And we've seen two debutants this season, so we've seen Jacob Laban and Zion Maiu make their debuts. But again, you're not necessarily filling them with confidence if you're selecting Adam Pompey ahead of them. Yeah, sure, you want a bit of backline cover. Pompey did play edge forward for the New South Wales Cup team a few weeks ago, so he's offering a bit of that backline cover and versatility, whatever. But you're playing with 16 blokes. So you got to weigh those things up.
Well, the good news is that after they get this Roosters game out of the way with, they've got the Panthers the week after, so it eases up from here. The problem is they've just failed to win a bunch of games, which was kind of the easy part of their schedule. Like they've just had a month where that was meant to be the bit where you tally up the wins, and they didn't get any. Like that's. Apart from the Rabbitohs one, to be fair, but everyone beats the Rabbitohs at the moment. But then again, we would have said everyone beats the Titans a couple of weeks ago as well. And apparently not quite everyone beats the Titans. But yeah, that's an issue. But also, like, I guess you just, at this point, you readjust and say, this is not a top four team. Like, they might have had ambitions of repeating in the top four, but they're not playing like it. They're not getting the results to justify that, in which case the table doesn't lie. Like, you are where you are based on the results that you get. So you readjust and say, well, let's not think about top four. Let's think about top eight. Is this a team that can still make the top eight from here? And yeah, like, of course, a win or two and they're back in the top eight straight away. Like, they're not far off from that. They just got to start getting those wins. And yeah, a victory against the Roosters, I don't know how it happens, but I know it can happen because this is the NRL and far crazier things have happened. I mean, the Warriors would probably be less favored to win this game than they were to lose against the Titans, and that happened. So if you can get a victory against the Roosters or the Panthers next week, or I think it's the Dolphins after that, so another top four team, they'll definitely get the victory against the bye following that, so they should be all right in that count. However you do it, I don't know. Maybe it's also the lingering minor on this point as well, of me just thinking of this team as the version they were last year versus the version they are this year, and being a bit too favorable to the 2023 version. I don't know, but I still kind of feel like one big statement win like that could turn a lot of things around. Like, it would just give them enough confidence to where things start to click a lot more. But yeah, we have to see that before we can know that. Like, we got to see it first. The other thing to bring it all the way back around to the start, the other thing that kind of lingered watching them is whether at first I was going to say paralysis by analysis is the phrase, isn't it? But whether this team is too committed to this style of play that they're kind of they've lost the variety and the sort of spontaneity. But then I think maybe a better way of saying that is the Sonny Rollins quote of like, are they playing or are they thinking, kind of thing. And maybe there's a little bit too much thinking in that, in terms of how they're trying to figure things out. Maybe it could be wrong, but it just feels like that's an impression I'm getting from that. So we'll see what they do against the Roosters.
Beauty. That is the Niche Cast. We will be recording our subscriber podcast tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. If you're part of the Patreon fund or you got a paid Substack subscription, big up. Let us know your thoughts on any of these topics discussed, and Māori ora. Love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.